Good afternoon and good morning to some of you. Welcome to Tea Time with Scholastic, and also welcome to LibLearnX. My name is Demosa Weber-Bay, and I am the Director of Information Services and Cultural Insight at Scholastic, where I have the joy of working in the archive and also answering reference questions for people who work at Scholastic. My pronouns are she and her, and I am coming to you from Queens, New York, ancestral home of the Lenape people. It is an honor to be here with you today. Small fact about me, I was an African American Studies major, and I also ran track. And so to discuss with you, just like Jesse Owens, a picture book by Ambassador Andrew Young, as told to Paula Young Shelton, illustrated by Gordon C. James, is a sincere honor. The interpreters that are here with us today are Shelley and Donna. Thank you for helping us. So we're going to have a wonderful program for you this afternoon. We're going to start out with a presentation from the author about the ideas and inspiration for this story. And then we're going to hear a little bit from the ambassador, Andrew Young himself, via video. And then we're going to have an opportunity to have a presentation from illustrator Gordon C. James. After that, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. So if you have questions and stuff like that, just please get ready as we go through the program. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Paula Young Shelton.
Good afternoon. It is such a pleasure to be here today to talk to librarians. Some of my favorite people are librarians. And as a first grade teacher, I am very dependent on our school librarians who understand when I come running in at the last minute and say, I need a book that has lots of great onomatopoeia in it, or I need a picture book about women activists, or I'm trying to find a book and I forgot the name of it, but it's got this little girl on the front and it's green with yellow writing. And somehow they can always help me find just the right book. I am also really indebted to the library because I never would have survived 7th grade without it. So thank you for all that you do. You provide an essential service that is often overlooked, but I want to tell you now that I really appreciate each of you and the valuable role that you play in our nation's education. I am really thrilled to be able to share with you my new book, Just Like Jesse Owens. This story came from my daddy, who used stories to teach us life lessons. He would tell us endless stories of his childhood in New Orleans, stories about how he convinced the bullies who were stealing his lunch money to pool their resources and buy a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter so that they could all eat. Or about how he got kicked out of 3rd grade for playing Mumbly Peg. And if you don't know what that is, it's a game that involves a pocket knife, or in my dad's case, an ice pick. So not appropriate for 3rd grade. But he also would tell us stories from the segregated South, like when he and Mama were arrested on their wedding day, driving through Mississippi, or about the time the Klan came to their house in South Georgia, and he wanted my mother to sit up in the window with a shotgun because she knew how to shoot, but she told him he was going to have to find another way to deal with them. But one of my favorite stories was the one he would tell us about Jesse Owens. How my grandfather, who we called Daddy Boo, took Daddy to see Jesse Owens disprove white supremacy in front of Hitler at the 1936 Olympics by winning over and over. Daddy Boo taught my dad that racism was a sickness and that he had an obligation to help people. Daddy Boo was a dentist who helped people regardless of their ability to pay. And sometimes he got paid in chickens or yard work, but he never turned people away. Even when the white folks started sneaking in the back at night to get their teeth fixed, Daddy Boo would welcome them. So he taught my dad to stay cool and to think his way out of any situations. And these lessons have served my father well throughout his career in the civil rights movement, Congress, the United Nations, the mayor's office, and in international business. And although I've heard these stories a million times, it was so much fun for me to hear my dad tell this story again, so I could make sure to get his perspective right in this book. And it is remarkable to me that my dad, who will be 90 in March, remembers 1936 like it was yesterday. But Daddy has always had an incredible memory. Of the thousands of speeches he has given, I've never seen him use a script. He can rattle off Bible scripture and poetry from memory and can retrieve facts and figures instantly. And when we started talking about this story, he was able to recall names, places, and events that happened when he was just 4 years old with amazing accuracy. And I just sat back and took notes, hoping that my mind would be as clear when I hit 90. I hope that you will enjoy this story as much as I enjoyed writing it. And I hope you can use it to help young people understand what life was like for children during this time. I think it is key for students to relate to this period of history by seeing how it impacted children like themselves. And I hope this book will show them how they can deal with today's problems by staying cool and calm, using their brains and working hard to be the best that they can be. Now, here is my daddy to show how his father taught him these important life lessons and what he learned from seeing Jesse Owens run in the 1936 Olympics.
Hello, I'm Andrew Young, and I'm excited about the new book, Just Like Jesse Owens. I was born in a wonderful city, New Orleans, Louisiana, in 1932. It was a working class neighborhood. We were walking, I think my father was taking me to my aunt, who lived 2 houses behind the Nazi Party headquarters. And the irony of this for me now and many people is that the Nazis are big bad people that we went to war with. At that time, 1936, the war hadn't happened yet, but they still had big swastikas out in front of the building. There was no way you could not explain to me what Nazism was. What are they? Why are they hiring Hitler, Daddy? And his answer was perfect. He said, white supremacy is a sickness, and it's their problem, not yours. You don't get mad with them. You try to understand them. And then he took me to the movies to see the 1936 Olympics. Jesse Owens won the 100-meter dash and broke the world record, or set the world record. And Hitler was supposed to give him his Olympic medal. But Hitler was upset because he was like these white supremacists in my neighborhood. And he and his stormtroopers all marched out of the stadium. And that was supposed to have been an insult to Jesse Owens. But my father said, but Jesse didn't pay any attention to that. He was there to win races. And he just remained cool, just went on and won 3 more gold medals. And he said, that's what you have to always remember all the way through life. Don't ever get mad in a crisis. When you get mad, the blood runs from your head to your fist to your feet, and you do something stupid. If they get angry and you are calm, your mind is working better than theirs. And he was very little. He was 5 feet 4 inches tall. He said, "You're not going to be any more than 5'7" or 5'8" at most. So you're not going to be able to beat up anybody. But you can think with anybody. If you don't get mad, get smart." When we first moved into this neighborhood in Atlanta, and Paula was about 6 or 7 years old, her school was in the midst of racial transition. As my father tried to help me to understand it, I helped my children to understand it. And with Paula particularly, because she was the baby and was always the quiet, sweet one. And I remember her coming home from school and saying, "Daddy, nobody likes me." And I said, "No, you have it wrong. Everybody likes you, but you don't speak to them, so they think you don't like them." So I said, "Tomorrow when you go to school, remember," and I dropped them off at school. I said, "Now, first thing you do when you go to class, well, one, speak to everybody you pass. And if you know their names, call them by name. And especially, do you speak to your teacher when you go in the class and call her by name?" I said, "Everybody likes to hear their name called." I said, "It's the most respectful thing you can do to a person." Those are basic human lessons that everybody needs to know. Don't get mad, get smart, and don't let any human conflict get you emotionally upset. Ultimately, I see that as the challenge of reading, of education, and of life itself. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you. Now we're going to bring in illustrator Gordon C. James.
Hello.
Welcome. So we wanted to get started with you and just understand, much like with the story itself, what inspired you with the artwork. We see the beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous piece that you have behind you. So if you wouldn't mind telling the audience a little bit about your childhood growing up near DC and what influenced your engagement with the arts to start, we'd appreciate that.
Well, I grew up in Fort Washington, Maryland, and I come from an artsy family. My father was in high school for visual arts in New York, and then he left as a singer. But he's a police officer, and my mother is an elementary school teacher, and they've just always been very supportive of the work that I've done.
An interesting fact that I learned as we've been working on this project with you at Scholastic is that you actually had experience with the Art and Writing Awards when you were a student. And I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about how that impacted you.
So I was first involved with it in my sophomore year. And I remember it was my first high school art class. I was excited to be in it. And it was second semester. And I walked in the door and I had this conversation with my teacher. And like a week later, she said, "Scholastics is next week. Take this piece of paper home, do a self-portrait." And I went home and I did a self-portrait and I won a gold key. And in my senior year, I participated in Scholastic Art and Writing, and I did a still life, and it won a gold key, and it actually won a Hallmark prize that they gave out at that time. And believe it or not, I still have it. And this is that painting from, 1990. G. James, wow. 1990. So this is it. And so Scholastics has meant a lot to me. It's great validation, and you know that you're competing on a national level with the best artists in high school at that time. So I was really excited to be a part of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, no
We're
problem.
really excited that you still have the artwork One
do.
of the joys of working in headquarters is that there's actually a lot of student art from the Art and Writing Awards over the decades that's framed and hangs in the hallway.
That's
It's kind
awesome.
of, yeah, we have the opportunity to see different work that students have done. So as we kind of flow into talking about the work that you did today, or this year, with the art that you've got behind you, there is a special set of pencils that you used for this project that have meaning for you. Would you mind sharing with the librarians here what decision you made, how to illustrate this particular story?
Well, when I graduated from college, I had a tough time for many not so great reasons with the painting classes and when I was in college. And I said, well, I need to be able to work in color. And I asked my parents for this set of pastels, and they bought me these, which I'm going to try not to drop them. So this beautiful set of 250 Sennelier chalk pastels. And back in, back in 2001, that set was like $850. And then I got them and I got hired at Hallmark and they bought all my supplies. And then they were so expensive, I was afraid to use them. And so I barely ever touched those things until Andrea Pickney asked me if I would want to draw in color for this book so that we could get the same energy that's in my charcoal drawings into the final art. And I was like, this is going to be great. I can use those pastels that my parents bought me all those years ago. And my mother was very excited. And she said, that's really nice of you, Gordon, because your father and I don't like wasting our money. so there we go.
I love that. Yeah, and the influence of generations, the pencils that your parents gave to you, the story that Ambassador Young shared with his daughter. Behind me, I have some quilts that I've made with scraps that I, got out of my grandmother's house. And so it's, just an incredible way to pull meaning from your own life into, a story that you're sharing out with the world. So we're going to actually now bring Paula Young Shelton back in so that all three of us are here. And thank you, Shelley. I see you switched interpreters. And we wanted to get just from both of you, if you're willing to share, since our audience today consists of librarians. I myself am a member of ALA, and I'm in ALSC, YALSA, and AASL, which are all of the different divisions for children's people who work with children. And then the Black Caucus, the Graphic Novel Comic Roundtable, and American Indian Library Association. And there are a lot of different librarians that are probably represented on the call today, from academic, librarians who are working with incarcerated youth, librarians that are, in, cultural heritage collections and all that. So if you guys wouldn't mind sharing, do you have a library story of your own that might tie our audience to the book? I'll start with Paula, if you want to go.
Sure. I am happy to share a story about the library. I spent a lot of time in the library as a kid, but in particular, I was going to a segregated school. It was a predominantly white school that was just becoming integrated. And as you can imagine, was not the best environment for a little Black girl who was, pretty smart in elementary school. And so I would finish all my work and I would just start talking and I would get in trouble. And when I was at a predominantly white school, they would put me out in the hall and I would spend most of my day in the hallway in trouble. Then I got transferred to a predominantly Black school and still was talking too much in class. But when they put me out, they would send me to the library. And I would go to the library, and at the time, my mother was pregnant with my little brother, who is 12 years younger than I am. And so I read every book I could find about childbirth, about raising Black children. I was reading James Comer, and, I just loved being in the library, and I learned so much. It was not much of an incentive for me to stop talking in class, but it certainly did help me thrive in an environment where previously I was just punished. And spending that time in the library was just invaluable to me.
I'm sure those librarians are proud of you today. Gordon, do you have a library story you want to share?
I just remember that my mom being a teacher, she loved the library. And as a matter of fact, when she retired, but by the time she had retired, her last job was as a reading specialist. And we would go to Oxon Hill Library. It would feel like at least every other weekend. And I would just love being in the library because my mother never said, oh, you can't take, because, back then there was no limit. You could take out books, So I could go home with 20 books, 30 books. And my mother never said, that's too many books. You can't read all those books. You can't take those books. And so how many places do you get to go as a kid where you can have as much of whatever it is that they have that you want? And the library was one of those places.
Yes, I definitely maxed out the borrowing limits myself as a young library user. So as we think about libraries, we're interested in finding out how that, and I also want to note if anybody has a specific question you want to ask, now is the time to get it into the chat. But in what ways did you do research? I want to ask both of you as you prepared to tell this story and to frame it for young children. So I'll go back to Paula if you want to tell us a little bit about your research process, and editing or revision or how that came through for you.
Sure. So my first primary resource was my dad. And so just talking to him and letting him tell the stories about what happened and just what growing up was like for him, about the kids he played with. That was great. And then I went online and started finding out about, finding making sure that his memories were historically accurate. So I went and watched so many videos of Jesse Owens in the Olympics, and that was really exciting to see him actually running and to look at the different events. And I looked up things like the Orpheum Theater that was in New Orleans at the time so that I could get a real picture of what it looked like. And so it was really fascinating to be able to go back and look at old photos and read what they wrote about that period of time as it was happening.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Gordon.
Go ahead. I was going to say that I had to do the same. I do a lot of research. I was lucky in that I'd been to New Orleans for the LLX. I always took a ton of pictures wherever I go. And then there are certain things that you have to make decisions on. You're like the cover here. It's like, well, do peaches and azaleas bloom at the same time? Can the picture be more of a metaphor than botanically accurate? You know what I mean? These are decisions that you have to make, and so like it was really fun. And part of the thing, and probably the most fun thing that I got to research was the wrought iron. So because there are wrought iron fences in certain illustrations in the book. And that was just really fun to illustrate that design work, which is not something that I grew up around. So it's always fun to learn about different things that you don't have a certain connection to. And, it's just anything you can learn, anything that broadens you.
I love
that. Wrought iron is such a key element in the New Orleans architecture. So you captured it.
Yes.
Beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
And I have a new phrase now, botanically accurate. I love that. So we wanted to say we have just a few minutes here left at the end, and we have a special treat, if we can pull it off, where we're going to have Gordon sketch very briefly for us as Paula reads a little bit from the book. So, I just want to give Gordon a little space to get yourself set up.
Okay. So I'm going to attempt a portrait of Andrew Young when he was Ambassador Andrew Young. And we're going to see how far we can get on this in our 2 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm ready.
Okay.
And I'll be reading a portion of the book that starts with when my dad first saw these Nazi sympathizers behind his aunt's house. Okay. This is from Just Like Jesse Owens. We played cards while Delia cooked dinner. In the middle of our game, strange music started coming from the house behind us. I looked out the window and saw men standing at attention, each holding one arm stretched straight. They were singing in a language I didn't understand. It sounded like they were yelling, "Hi, Hitler!" It scared me so much I nearly fell out of my seat. The next day, I told my friends all about what I'd seen. I even acted it out. "That's nuts," said Norby, who copied my pose. "I wonder if it's a new dance." JD tried to do a little jitterbug. "Maybe they were playing Flying Aces," Jimmy Ray said. He put out both arms like an airplane and ran around in circles. We all started running around pretending to be fighter jets until we heard our mothers calling us home for dinner. When I got home, Daddy was talking to two men at the door. "Good evening, Mr. Berman, Mr. Stern." They were salesmen who sold Daddy his dental supplies. They were the only white people who'd show their faces here in broad daylight, though white customers would sneak in at night. They were talking kind of loud as they walked down the steps. "Dr. Young, how can you live with those savages down the street? They think they're better than you and me. That Hitler is doing terrible things to my people in Germany, and they think he should run the world. If you weren't such a good customer, I wouldn't step foot in this neighborhood." That evening, after the last patient left, Daddy and I went out to the sidewalk to play catch. I tossed the ball and asked, "Daddy, what's Hitler?" Daddy paused, then tossed the ball back with his own question. "Why do you ask, Andrew?" "Well, I saw soldiers saying hi to Hitler behind Aunt Delia's house. And then Mr. Berman and Mr. Stern were talking about him too." I caught the ball as Daddy answered. "Hitler is the Chancellor of Germany. He's like the president. And they weren't saying hi, they were saying Heil, a German word that means hail. It's to salute and honor Hitler." "Why would they salute the almost president of Germany when he wasn't even there?" I tossed the ball back. Daddy didn't answer me at first. Finally, he threw me a grounder and said, "Hitler believes white Christians are better than everyone else. So he doesn't care much for colored folks like us or Jewish people like Mr. Berman and Mr. Stern. Hitler's followers are showing they agree with him by saluting." I threw the ball straight into Daddy's glove and asked, "Why do they think they're better than us?" Daddy immediately popped a fly ball back. "Because they're sick. Racism is a sickness. We've got to help folks like that." I caught the pop fly and stared back at my daddy. "How do we do that?" "Well, you can start by just being the best person you can be. That's why we practice baseball, and why Mother makes you do your homework, and why we tell you to be polite and greet everyone. This will show others that it doesn't matter what color your skin is. It's what you do that counts." The next Saturday, Daddy and I got all dressed up in our Sunday best, and we took the streetcar downtown to the Orpheum Theater for a special event. We walked around the side of the theater and down an alley to the window marked colored. We bought 2 tickets. Then Daddy took my hand as we went in the back door and climbed the steps to the balcony to sit in the colored only section. I didn't like that we had to go in through the back and sit in the balcony when we paid the same amount as white folks who went in the front door and sat where they wanted to. Once we were inside the theater, I didn't care where we sat. It was beautiful. I looked up and the ceiling was covered with gold, red, and blue shapes. Suddenly, the lights went out. The projector flashed on, and a loud voice boomed out through the speakers. A movie tone newsreel flickered on the screen. It was highlights from the 1936 Olympics in Germany. There was that man called Hitler with his funny little mustache and a stadium full of people who stood up to salute him. They looked just like those men outside Aunt Delia's window. The athletes in the film ran, jumped, and threw as the crowds applauded. The best part of the whole film was Jesse Owens, a runner who looked just like me, winning over and over and over again. I cheered as Jesse pulled away of the pack in the 100-meter dash and won a gold medal. I shouted as Jesse flew through the air and leaped over the sand to nab a gold medal in the long jump. I screamed as Jesse raced past the others in the 200 meters for yet another gold. I roared as Jesse took the lead and passed the baton to help bring the Americans victory and win gold again in the 4x100 meter relay. I saw Jesse Owens run, head up, back straight, eyes focused, on to victory to win 4 gold medals in front of a man who thought people like me were not as good as white people.
All right.
Thank you. Okay.
And so that is my portrait of Ambassador Andrew Young. Let's see if I can not have it on such an angle.
That's beautiful.
That's incredible.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Paula, for sharing this story with us and with everyone today. We truly appreciate you putting this book and this story on the shelf next to so many other important ones, so that this story lives on and into the future. And thank you, Gordon, so much, not only for the sketch that you just did today, but for all of your work that you've been contributing the past couple of years to the library shelves. We look forward to your continued work in this field, and we're thankful to have you. And everyone who tuned in today, thank you so much. As you can see in the chat, this book is Just Like Jesse Owens by Ambassador Andrew Young, as told to Paula Young Shelton and illustrated by Gordon C. James, is going to be available this summer 2022. So please get the story and share it with all of your young ones. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.